This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek. The coverage of what's going on in Japan as far as the release of over 1.3 million tons of radioactive water is an issue that most Americans and working people are unaware of. And joining us for this interview today is Caitlin Stronell. She's with Citizens Nuclear Information Center in Tokyo, and Tsukuru Force, who's with the Pacific Asian Nuclear Free Peace Alliance. Welcome both of you to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Caitlin, why don't you talk about the Citizens Nuclear Information Center and the concerns and issues that you have about this ongoing situation at Fukushima, which is really not being publicized pretty much anywhere in the world, even in Japan.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a conspiracy. Citizens Nuclear Information Center is one of the oldest no-nuke groups in Japan. It was founded by a nuclear chemist, in fact, back in the day when everyone thought nuclear was going to be the answer to Japan's lack of energy resources. And he realized it wasn't, and realized that what we had to do was empower citizens to actually understand the dangers, because it's it's a very esoteric, it's a very difficult kind of area, and it's very easy, especially for Japanese, to just leave it to the experts. And then we see what happens when we do leave it to the experts. They tell us it's all safe, and then an accident like Fukushima Daiichi happens. So our mission is to basically empower citizens. It's a citizen science kind of approach, and we're independently funded. We don't obviously take, we're basically funded by members and research grants occasionally. So the issue with the water in Fukushima Daiichi, which the government is, right now there's elections in Japan, and so probably they might not decide on actually releasing the water until after the elections are over. But in any case, it's pretty imminent that they're going to actually start releasing this water, this radioactive wastewater into the Pacific. So there's a lot of issues. Obviously, there's been huge protests in Japan right from the beginning. Like, it was announced almost exactly 2 years ago tomorrow by the then Prime Minister Suga that the government had authorized this release. But even before that, TEPCO, and there'd been various hearings in Fukushima local areas. There was just so much opposition. The hearings, there was hardly anyone who thought it was a good idea. The fisher folk, of course, are deeply concerned that, after 12 years where they haven't been able to actually catch fish to sell, they've all been kind of caught and then tested for radiation. They've finally thought that they could get back to their livelihood, and now this happens. And of course, it's going to be very difficult for them to sell fish. So basically, the fisher people are completely opposed. And obviously, various other groups in Fukushima and other areas of Japan are also opposed. And of course, the international opposition we've seen just grow and grow. Yeah, obviously, the oceans are not just Japan's, and Japan making this unilateral decision to release this water has made a lot of people very angry. The Pacific Island Forum has commissioned a report, which was 5 independent experts who made an analysis of the situation. They were able to talk to TEPCO and get data. And their conclusion was that really there's some very serious scientific problems. There's, for one, there's nobody actually really knows what's in the tanks. And, there's kind of a scientific level that you're supposed to do sampling. You're supposed to figure out what exactly is in there. And they haven't really even met these scientific standards. So, and they refuse to let anyone independently test the tanks. So we don't really know what's in them. and they've said that they're going to run the 70% of the water that's there now, which is above the standards for that they've said is safe to release. So they have to run it through a filtration system called ALPS, and it didn't work the first time. There's no guarantee that it's going to work the second time, and they haven't really got a proper plan. They just say, well, we're going to keep running it through this filtration system till it gets to the right standard. But at the moment, it's planned on taking 30 to 40 years. That's 30 to 40 years that the fishermen can't sell their fish. And the other point that the Pacific Island scientists mentioned was that they haven't really considered alternatives. There's been several alternatives put forward, and they've kind of been dismissed. It's just, there's no real explanation why this is the best solution. So yeah, there's a lot of problems, and it really is going to affect the global commons of the oceans. So, I think it really is an international issue.
Well, when it was sold to Japan by Ronald Reagan, who at that time was working for General Electric, he called it Atoms for Peace. It's 12 years after Fukushima, and most people are unaware that they still have not removed the radioactive rods, melted radioactive rods in the nuclear reactors. They still have to cool them with water, which then becomes contaminated. They have tritium in that water, and they also have waste, nuclear waste from Fukushima, which is still spread out, thousands and thousands of bags of radioactive waste spread out over Fukushima. And the government has wanted other prefectures to take those bags, kind of a collective distribution, collective responsibility, distributing the waste throughout Japan. So this release of the water, it's opposed by people, and there have been actions in Korea and other countries. Even in the United States, there's opposition to it. And Tsukuru, maybe you can talk about a rally that was held in New York and growing opposition in the United States to the release of this radioactive water.
So there has been, we established sort of an ad hoc coalition of activists and organizers across the United States. And so some of us are in the West Coast, and others are on the East Coast. So about maybe like several months ago, maybe I would say 3 months ago, we decided, in solidarity with the activists and organizers in Japan, we will do, sort of like a global week of action. So during this week, so actually New York kicked off the week of action on Saturday, April 8th. So Manhattan Project for Nuclear Free World, they did a rally in front of New York Public Library, which is a very popular location for, both locals and tourists. And I actually happened to be in New York City on April 8th, so I was lucky to participate, in their rally. One unique feature of this rally, and I mean, I kind of hate to call it a feature, but so here's the thing. So in the United States, on the West Coast, the awareness about the Fukushima issue was higher, has been higher than that of East Coast, because we are, facing the Pacific Ocean. And since 2015, the Fukushima radiation has been detected, on the West Coast of the United States. So naturally, the awareness is far higher, but on the East Coast, not so much. But so recently, Holtec International, who is a manufacturer of nuclear, power generation related equipment, and also operator, and literally making a killing of the decommissioning business. So Holtec International announced its plan to release, radioactive wastewater from Indian Point Energy Center, which is a decommissioned nuclear power plant, into the Hudson River, of all places. So that was actually the issue, along with the Fukushima issue, that was being talked about at this rally. So, we are we are trying to drum up support, raise awareness and drum up support of New Yorkers, because, that's a really issue that affects them directly. But this really actually, captures their attention to the Fukushima issue as well. So that's, that's what took place in New York. But the thing is, and I was lucky to be able to speak a little bit at this rally too. But so the Fukushima wastewater release really, if it's allowed to happen, it sets a dangerous precedent, because now, they are being, they will be able to say, oh, they're doing it in Fukushima, we can do it too. And, it's not as if it's not happening in the United States. It's already happening. The United States government, currently is in support of, this practice of releasing wastewater into, the ocean and the rivers and whatnot. It's happening in San Onofre, about 70 miles from LA. It's a decommissioned plant, and they are releasing it into the Pacific Ocean, on the area where there are a lot of surfers are, actively surfing. And so they are actually, the nuclear industry is very successful in creating this narrative that wastewater release from either active or decommissioned nuclear power plants is a routine practice and a commonplace. And they're being very, very successful at that. So, we really should not let this water release from Fukushima happen, and also, from into the Hudson River.
And there were over 100 nuclear plants in the United States. Many of them, their lifetime, they want to extend the plants. They want to extend the lifetime of plants in Japan. Japan is known as the Ring of Fire. Fukushima is still a disaster, even though they haven't said it's a disaster. In fact, the former Prime Minister Abe said they've overcome the situation. He's been decontaminated. He lied to the Olympic Commission. He lied to people. It's still going on. And the Biden administration, and Democrats and Republicans, want to build small nuclear plants, supposedly better small nuclear plants, but they have no place for the waste right now in the over 100 nuclear plants. This whole issue of where to put the waste is still a major issue, both in the United States and Japan. Caitlin, the waste from the Fukushima meltdown, it's still there, and there's a struggle in Japan over where it should go.
Yes, and I think on the news this week was they now have even more photos that they've managed to get of the inside of the plant. And yeah, it's a complete disaster. It's really quite dangerous. The concrete has all eroded, and they say, when in the case of Chernobyl, for example, they put that sarcophagus over it, and it's just as it is. Whereas TEPCO insists that they're going to remove the melted down fuel. And whether they can actually do that, they've only just got photo after 12 years. They've had a few photos and stuff and information beforehand, but the first bunch of robots they sent in, even the robots died. It's very unrealistic to imagine that they can even remove that fuel anytime soon. And even if they did, you're absolutely right. What are they going to do with it? And yeah, there's just so many questions. And the thing is that those questions impact what happens now. So because they have this insistence that they're going to fix it up and everything's going to be fine, that means that, that they have to rush and get rid of the water. And it's basically the whole long-term plan, they call it a roadmap of how they plan to decommission is really, the whole thing really needs to be looked at. And yeah, this idea about, you were mentioning before, Steve, about distributing the radioactivity throughout Japan. I think this really ties in with what Tsukuru was saying about making it okay. Yeah, it's okay to have radioactive waste everywhere. It's all right. See, nobody's dying. It's all fine. And because it is so hard to prove the connection between radiation and cancer and other diseases, that's one of the reasons they get away with it. But yeah, this whole sort of normalization of radioactive waste in the community is really very scary.
And in California recently, the Newsom administration with PG&E said that they were going to extend the life of Diablo Canyon. They fabricated, in my view, they fabricated an energy crisis, and they got the legislature to give billions of dollars to PG&E to keep the Diablo Canyon plant going. At the same time, they're cutting incentives for solar energy in California, and the Democrats went along with it. I mean, it seems that they're ready to push, continue to push nuclear power, even though California, like Japan, is vulnerable to earthquakes, and there's an earthquake fault under Diablo Canyon. Tsukuru, I mean, it seems like people were duped, and the Democratic legislators said, oh, we have to do it, otherwise there are going to be power outages.
Yeah, Steve, you're absolutely right. And actually, so what concerns me nowadays, because, you know, I'm formerly a business consultant, and, you know, I've observed sort of like investment market, you know, for years and years. And so recently what captures my attention is this really, you know, kind of celebration of nuclear industry as a next hot investment market, or, you know, possibly the hottest investment market. And actually some, you know, investment companies are actually including nuclear industry in the climate portfolio, you know, so essentially selling it as a green solution, right? So that's like really what concerns me. And actually there's this, you know, certain company who publishes kind of newsletter to distribute to, you know, business people and consumers like me, and, you know, talking about nuclear industry as a investment target, like every day. I mean, literally like every day of the week. And, you know, imagine like young people, you know, in a business, you know, profession. I mean, imagine like they are being fed, you know, this kind of information every day, and sort of like made, you know, being made to believe, oh, okay, the nuclear industry is actually good because number one, this is a really, you know, money maker, and number two, this is a green solution, and, you know, so that's really, you know, very, very scary. And actually, okay, so before I end, I just want to call attention to another thing, because something, Steve, you mentioned actually kind of triggered my thought. So, you know, what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, right? Derailment and subsequent burning of toxic material, which is you know, causing a lot of issues right now, and being covered up, right? So well, Holtec again is building right now like temporary nuclear waste facilities in New Mexico and Texas, and in some places they are successfully blocking the construction, which is a good thing. But their plan is though to, you know, transport nuclear waste by rail, you know, from all over the United States, right? And really like rail industry or rail infrastructure in the United States is really actually it's really terrible. I mean, the derailment is happening every day, literally. So imagine like what could happen if you transport nuclear waste by rail. I mean, this is insane, and I think, you know, many people should be made aware.
Of course, these companies, which supposedly were testing for radioactivity, nuclear contamination at Hunters Point shipyard, falsified the Test America, and Tetra Tech, the whistleblowers said that they weren't being properly remediated. They were fired. There's $1 billion eco scandal because they weren't testing. And it turns out that Tetra Tech is now doing the testing at East Palestine. And guess what? The tests say that everything's fine. Don't worry, be happy. So you can count on these companies and the EPA, which is allowed them to burn off those toxins, and no criminal prosecution for putting the community in danger. And they can't even leave. They're stuck there. The working class poor people that are stuck in East Palestine, they're terrified of their children, their grandchildren being contaminated. And so the lack of real protection and health and safety is endemic. And the other issue I wanted to raise is this whole militarization of Asia. The United States wants to build a nuclear base in Australia. There's the AUKUS, which is the Australian UK-US military treaty for the expansion of nuclear weapons. And in Japan, the United States would be quite happy for Japan to militarize, to get nuclear weapons. They brought nuclear weapons to Okinawa, which was illegal under the US-Japan Security Agreement, but it didn't seem to bother them. And the people of Japan have been opposed to a US militarization. There are jets and helicopters that fly over Tokyo, over Okinawa all the time. I mean, it is the US controls the airspace of Japan. I mean, Caitlin, it seems like it continues to be like a colony. I mean, imagine we're so long after the Second World War, and they still control the airspace in Japan, or even in Tokyo.
Yeah, actually, it's quite. I'm actually coming to you from Okinawa, in fact, because this is where I live now. I work remotely with CNIC, but so I'm coming to you from Miyakojima, which is 400 kilometers from Taiwan, and it's really at the front line of this militarization you're talking about. A self-defense force helicopter came down just a couple of days ago with 10 people. They still haven't found the bodies. They fly over. It's this tropical paradise, and then there's these helicopters that even the Japanese self-defense force, let alone the main island of Okinawa, which, as you mentioned, is basically controlled by the US. The people of Okinawa are, I mean, this is really not what they bargained for when they were returned from America to Japan in 1972. It was the 50th anniversary last year, and there was a lot of protest at the time. 50 years ago, they had this song, give us back Okinawa," and now they're still singing it because basically, it was never returned. It's basically a colony. I really feel that I look at the sugarcane plants, and which are all part of the Japanese process of because Japan didn't have any sugar in the Second World War. All of the trade routes were cut off, so they decided to grow it in the colonies. So here we all are growing sugarcane and not having enough, having to import all our vegetables from the mainland on ships. And when they don't come because of typhoons, we all have to eat instant ramen for 2 months of the year. But yeah, it really, the situation is very much a colonial one, and the militarization is very real. Like every day, really, there's a Japanese SDF base, self-defense force base, just down the road from me, and they've stationed missiles there, and they brought them from the harbor along the main road right outside my house. And so it really, these big trucks, it looked like a sort of Russian military parade, or sort of a North Korean kind of, showing off all these missiles. It was obviously all covered, but yeah, it's very real. But I think again, it's Okinawa is going to be sacrificed. So the people in mainland Japan are like, oh yeah, well, you Okinawans, you just have to, take all the bases and the missiles and keep us safe. But it's really a very unfair relationship.
And on May 6th, there is going to be a rally, a march, Port Templa in Australia. It's a proposed nuclear base that the United States wants to build, and have the Australians build a lot of nuclear submarines. And it would destroy the port if it would become a US exclusion zone if they build a US military base there. It seems like the United States has unlimited resources for the war machine, but can't even take care of the unemployed, the homeless, the people that need health care, and even can't take care of the waste from the nuclear plants which exist in the United States. So Tsukuru, you got recently a resolution passed by a city body opposing this release of radioactive water with tritium. What are your plans to expand that so people can be educated about the danger of the radioactive water release, and also what people can do about it?
I live in West Hollywood, city of West Hollywood in California. And so getting this resolution passed was and is sort of the tools to oppose and somehow stop, discharge of wastewater from Fukushima from happening. We are doing, or we are thinking about and doing, a lot of things in the United States. But when we thought about, okay, what could be, what kind of tactic can we use to push this forward and educate people? So two things about the resolution. So some say, city resolutions are not very effective in, pushing issues like this. But I actually personally beg to differ because number one, our plan is to get, resolutions passed by as many cities as possible on the West Coast of the United States. And if we get many resolutions passed and, be successful in making much noise, that can get the Biden administration's attention. But not only that, the process of trying to pass the resolutions can be used effectively to educate people and raise awareness of the issue itself. Because unfortunately, in the United States, the awareness of this issue is not quite there. Because no mainstream media will cover it. So we don't have media's attention. So naturally, like what we thought, how we started to think was, okay, how do we get people's attention? So resolution is like one way of doing that. Yeah. So and we doing other things as well. We just launched a postcard campaign to encourage people in the United States to send postcards to the governor of Fukushima Prefecture and the mayors of two towns, Okuma and Futaba, where the nuclear power plant is located. Again, this is a tactic to get people's attention, raise awareness. So we chose these three targets because, frankly, they are small enough targets. We didn't want to do like, Japanese consulate and, or Japanese government and stuff like that anymore because, then we may not get their attention. But like, what if, we can flood the mailbox of Okuma town or town of Futaba, with the postcards from the United States? That may catch people's attention or local media's attention. So, that's our thinking behind it.
And Caitlin, you're still trying to get the word out. And I mean, this is information blockade about this leaking nuclear plant, the radioactive rods that are still melted. I mean, most people do not know about it. And the media, corporate media, is not letting them know about the fact that this plant is still releasing radioactive water. I mean, it seems like incredible, 12 years after, and then they say that nuclear power is safe. Don't worry, be happy.
It's a propaganda kind of, like, I'm sure there's a whole lot of lessons in this. Like, how do you really, like, it's Orwellian almost. It's like, war is peace, nuclear is safe. It's really, it's such a contradiction. But like, yeah, people are, I mean, because the government has such amazing propaganda tools, like, I mean, the pamphlets and the beautiful brochures about that have been made about how safe tritium is and distributed to all the schools. And I mean, there really is a huge, there's a really big kind of, there's so many resources that governments have, and they're using all of them. And it's, and as we mentioned before, the media, of course, has a lot of vested interests in large electricity companies, and so the whole industry in general. So yeah, it is very difficult to get the information out. But I think just on Scooter's note about the resolution passed in Los Angeles, I just think that's amazing. And just today I've been compiling just gathering all of the resolutions and statements and forum conference statements that have been issued around the world, and putting them all together on a page on our website. So it would be great to put the LA resolution there too. But it really shows that, you know, there are really people who care, and there's so many of them. It was quite encouraging for me to make this page today. So yeah, we really have to, I think starting small is a really good way. Local is really, it's much easier to reach people at a local level. And then as Tsukuru mentioned with New York, it happens to you as well. So like everyone is really connected. And you know, it's in my backyard now the whole world is everyone's backyard. So I think, you know, I think that's a really important level, that local level, and connecting it. I think the top down kind of era is possibly beyond us, and now really bottom up is looking like, you know, the only option. So yeah, for sure.
And of course, I mean, children are continuing to get thyroid cancer in Fukushima, and the workers, there are thousands, tens of thousands of workers, day laborers who work there, who have been contaminated, and many of them had no training. Imagine that, having no training and working on a nuclear removal process. It's illegal, but the government, which really runs TEPCO, has allowed that. They contract out to Yakuza to recruit these workers. Some of them are foreign workers from other countries, and they're sent into the plant thinking that it's not a real danger, and then they get contaminated. Many of them have probably been getting cancer, and they don't know about it, and they're not protected by the government for being used in that plant.
This is you know, a very serious issue. And again, the government's just, as far as the children with thyroid cancer, last year I think it was 6 people who were children at the time of the accident and have since developed thyroid cancer have started a lawsuit to sue the government to basically claim responsibility, to say, you know, we need compensation, and the government denies that there's any connection. There's been a huge increase, like in numbers of thyroid cancer cases, which is and you, as I mentioned before, you can't actually make a causal link between radiation and cancer. It's not that simple. There's so many causes of cancer that, you know, you can't just pin it. So it's an epidemiological thing. So if, you know, if there's a normal rate of cancer amongst children, in Fukushima, it's tens of times higher, hundreds of times higher than it is in the rest of Japan. And the government claims this is because they've been doing more tests. But if the tests are positive, like, you know, there's a lot of contradictions anyway. These 6 people have started this court case. And in the case of Fukushima, it's been court cases where a lot of information has actually come out. And so we'll have to see how this one goes. And before the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, there's always been court cases, but they hardly ever won. And after that, there has been a change in the judiciary as well. So there's some hope that the thyroid cancer court case will be successful, and, you know, make the government take responsibility. There's been a lot of workers' cases as well, and again, the government denies. Well, actually, the case at the moment, I'm not all that familiar with it, so I'll probably need to confirm this with you later. But a worker who developed cancer and worked in different nuclear power plants across the country, and then in Fukushima after the accident, is also at present involved in a court case. So it'll be important to see the outcomes of that, and, you know, if it can set a precedent, that might help. But yeah, I think the issue with you were mentioning with day laborers, with the fact that the Yakuza are often the people who round up workers and take them in. And there's danger money that's supposed to be paid to workers that gets taken by the middleman Yakuza. There's so many problems with workers issues. And yeah, I think that, in such a dark industry where so much is covered up and there's so much collusion, it just makes it so much easier for workers to be exploited, for the vulnerable to be exploited. So yeah, I think that really sums up the industry.
And how can people get more information about your center?
Yeah, Citizens Nuclear Information Center. We have an English website and a contact form from there. So yeah, definitely check it out.
Tsukuru, how would they get in touch with you and find out more about the resolutions?
Okay, that's a little harder because basically, the group I lead is just a small grassroots, but we do have a Facebook page. Yeah, so that's Pacific Asian Nuclear Free Peace Alliance. If you put that in a search box on Facebook, I'm sure it'll come up.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining this discussion. I think it's important for working people, for the people of the world, to know what's going on in Fukushima, to know what's going on even in their own neighborhood, as far as the danger of nuclear waste and contamination, and the likelihood there are going to be other earthquakes and other dangerous problems at these nuclear plants. It is not safe, despite all the propaganda saying it is wonderful and let's build more nuclear plants. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you
For having us.